Good evening and welcome to the Township of Woolwich Council meeting on Tuesday, May 14th, 2024. We are now live on YouTube. Welcome all those attending in person and everyone tuning into the live stream. I'm going to start with a roll call. I, Mayor Shantz, am present and chairing this meeting. Councillor Bryant.
Present.
Councillor Burgess.
Present.
Councillor Cadeau.
Present.
Councillor Grant.
Present.
Councillor Schwint.
Present.
Thank you. I acknowledge the land on which we live has been here from time immemorial, and the Indigenous people have lived here from time immemorial. I thank the Chinootan, also called the Attawandaron, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee people who have lived here and cared for this land and who continue to share and steward this land with us. May we together learn to care for each other, our flora and fauna, and the land that sustains us. Let's start with a moment of silence. Thank you. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, there are no items to come forward from closed. We didn't have a closed session. We do have minutes from April 23rd, council minutes from April 23rd, 2024, and committee of the whole minutes from May 7th, 2024. Someone like to move those? Councillor Bryant, Councillor Grant, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. There are no public meetings, no presentations. We do have one delegation this evening. And as a reminder, delegates have a maximum of 7 minutes to speak unless council or the clerk has set a different time. There will be a timer on the screen and you will hear a warning when you have 1 minute and another when your time is up. It can be loud and make you jump. Once you are finished, please wait for questions from council. When there are no more questions for you, you may stay for the rest of the meeting or leave when you want. Council discussion and debate will start when all questions of clarification have finished. And tonight's delegation is Alan Marshall, so please go ahead when you're ready. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. Good evening, Woolwich Council, staff, and massive gallery. I'm speaking focused entirely on a presentation at the last track meeting, presentation by Joe Ricker. Joe Ricker's track presentation on April 25th, 2024, spoke to the impossibility of NDMA and chlorobenzene concentrations ever reaching zero, allegedly based upon, quote, asymptotic behavior, unquote. The goal, however, is not to reach zero. The goal is to reach drinking water standards, namely 9 parts per trillion for NDMA and 80 parts per billion for chlorobenzene. I repeat, not zero. Hence, Mr. Joe Ricker's entire premise was wrong at the track meeting. Joe advises that in 2023, the average concentration for NDMA was 91 parts per trillion. You may have seen it written as decimal 091, that's parts per billion. It's 91 parts per trillion in the municipal upper aquifer, and 1,600 parts per trillion is the average concentration of NDMA last year in the municipal lower. That is between 10 and 160 times higher than the drinking water standard of 9. The average concentration in 2023 of chlorobenzene was 123 parts per billion, municipal upper, and 173 parts per billion, municipal lower, versus a drinking water standard of 80 parts per billion. These concentrations under current conditions are decades away from reaching drinking water standards. Lengths S please stop blustering and baffle gabbing and keep on pumping until you're at least close to the drinking water standards. Then at that point in time, not now, come to the public cap in hand, begging for relief from having to pump forever, but at least be closer than you are now. Citizens, including myself, over the decades have suggested numerous other accepted remediation methods above and beyond pump and treat. All of these remediation methods have been rejected by Uniroyal and successors, generally with little to no rationale. Lanxess, again, do your job. Pump and treat has been described as the cheapest, least effective method, which is at least partially why it is so popular among polluters. So get back to pumping. Literally, the company, Lanxess, and their predecessors have had decades of never-ending excuses as to why both on and off-site wells are not meeting the target pumping rates that your consultants have set for you. They can't even meet their own consultants' pumping rates. And that is multiple months out of 17 of the last 24 years. They haven't met them. I now better understand why Uniroyal and successors desperately covered up the DNAPL situation. Free phase and residual DNAPLs, or dense non-aqueous phase liquids, inhibit the likelihood of pump and treat being successful. DNAPLs have been found both on and off the Uniroyal site in the Elmira aquifers and explain the admitted excess hundreds of kilograms of chlorobenzene found in the Elmira aquifer. The first sample of free-phase DNAPL was found by Bob Hillier, Ministry of Environment hydrogeologist, which he presented a glass jar to CPAC in either 92 or 93. That was the first. There's been more since. Woolwich Township's public consultation has been shameful for almost 9 years now. One of your own track members has already told you and the public this in writing. You've got a written copy from one of your current track members as to, now he didn't use the word shameful, he used words like deferential and overwhelmed, et cetera, et cetera. Having the polluter, his client-driven consultants, and his captured regulator, the Ministry of Environment, in total control of the cleanup is a gross conflict of interest that apparently Woolwich Council are not willing or capable of admitting or recognizing. It's a gross conflict of interest. It has been from day one, which is why we aren't getting anywhere fast. In conclusion, this latest initiative, asymptotic behavior, this latest initiative is but one more in a long history of self-serving behavior by Uniroyal Lanxess, fueled by fancy words and junk science in order to save themselves millions of dollars in cleanup costs. The lack of pumping described earlier and the paragraph on DNAPLs can be proven factually, but neither here nor at track are the appropriate location. This, well, that's good timing. The simple or the politest response to that being inappropriate locations, I can't prove anything to you in 7 minutes. That's ridiculous, whether it's here or whether it's a track. There are other reasons why here and track are not appropriate. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I will attempt to answer them if they're on topic.
Are there any questions? No? Councillor
Would you be
Schlein.
able to send those remarks in written form first?
I have given them to the young lady. She has a copy and she'll get them out to you. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you. Mr. Marshall, I know we had a meeting where you kind of gave us the lowdown on,
Hydro G 101.
yeah.
Yeah.
Could you remind me what DNAPL is again? I think I recall, but
Okay. Technically, it's a dense non-aqueous phase liquid. What that means is we sort of understand that solvents and benzene, toluene, all the common solvents and chlorobenzene readily dissolve in water. A DNAPL chemical, and most of them, but not all, are chlorinated. And because they're chlorinated, oh boy, not specific gravity, their mass is greater than 1.0. It's heavier than water. It sinks, hence the dense. And the non-aqueous, I always like to think of mercury. And you may or may not recall back in the 80s, they had the blob. They called it the blob in the St. Clair River from Dow Chemical. That blob sitting on the bottom of the river was DNAPL. You've got blobs in Elmira in your aquifers, both on-site and off. So it's a heavy sinking chemical. And the bad news is it will dissolve slowly. And by slowly, estimates range from decades to centuries. So there is chlorobenzene in the free phase, residual and free phase. Free phase is the blob. And it's in the aquifers, and it is not helping clean up the drinking water aquifers because it is continuing to dissolve. It might be dissolved in another 10 years or another 100 years. Depends how much there is. But there has been a recognition publicly by both Ramin Ansari and the Ministry of Environment that there are several hundred kilograms of excess chlorobenzene. Somehow they calculated how much Unaroyal had discharged over the decades, and they claim they don't know where the rest is coming from, which is ridiculous. They just don't want to admit it's free phase DNAPL, because then the next question is, well, why'd you ever go with pump and treat when you've got free phase DNAPL? So you just deny it. So can I help you any other way on that?
No, thank you. That was helpful because I was just about to ask, you mentioned that pump and treat is the least effective. So
Yes.
that kind of answers the next part of the question.
Excellent.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Does council wish any further discussion on this? Sure. Okay, there's no unfinished business. We do have a consent agenda. There are 3 items. Does anyone want to pull anything from the consent agenda? No? Would someone like to move the consent agenda? Councillor Grant, second by Councillor Cadeau. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. All right, that brings us then to staff report and the quarterly report for the first quarter. I'll call on Deputy Director of Financial Services, Richard Petherick. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So before council is the Q1 report for 2024. I'll go over some of the operating and capital, and then I'll kind of move into the water and the wastewater. So from the operating perspective, just over 3.5 million of the net operating levy budget of 14.8 has been spent year to date. That results in a positive variance of 0.92%. And as the report indicates, that's actually in a better position than we were at this time last year, which was in a negative of 0.02%. So there are a couple of items that we are keeping track of, but they're in the report, so I don't need to kind of quite go over them. But from the capital side, I can say that, again, this is the first quarter, so we're just starting our construction season. You would have seen already a number of tenders and RFPs that have been awarded so far this year. So we're just starting to ramp up with those activities, and you'll see more, I guess, more expenditures recorded in the second quarter report when we bring that to council. Looking at the water and wastewater budgets, first from the wastewater program perspective, we are tracking in a deficit position of just over $300,000. 2 real factors that we can see from that. One is still with regards to the inflow and infiltration. We still have some issues with that. And one of the things I would say, and you would see it in the report from the operating perspective, that winter control is in a really good spot. It's because a lot of precipitation fell, but not necessarily as water, or not necessarily as snow, but more as water. So as we had that, some rainfall that we've seen in the first quarter, that really gets into our sewer systems, which in turn gets into the regional treatment plants, and then we get billed for that. So you can see that we're tracking a little higher on that from those regional expenditures, which makes up the majority of our budget. The other side of it is we're seeing that the revenue side, that consumption revenue that we have recorded is just a little bit shorter than what I think we were anticipating at this time at Q1. But it's not something that I would say right now that is causing me great concern, especially from the I&I perspective, because if we get into the rest of the year and it becomes a very dry, that deficit can quickly turn on its head. From the water program side, we are also in a deficit position of about $195,000. With that, it's again really with regards to the that rate consumption that we see. It's a little behind our target, but I can say we can already see that being turned around in the April timeframe, and so we're starting to see that turn around. So again, given that we are seeing that turnaround, it doesn't cause me great concern at this moment in time in the first quarter seeing that deficit position. So with that, Madam Mayor, there's other things within the quarter report updating council on the activities that we have in our business plan. So we'll be happy to take any questions that council may have.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Burgess.
Through you, Mayor Shantz, the director. Just quick question on the water and wastewater. If I'm not mistaken, we increased those significantly on our revenue side, and yet we're still coming in at a deficit, or is that going to be later in the year that those are being increased?
Yeah, through Madam Mayor. So the increase would have started in the March billings. So January and February were at the old rates, and the new rates started in March. I think the other thing to recall is that part of those rate increases were actually increases to the reserve charges, or the transfers to the reserve. So that's part of what that rate is as well. It's not just based on the pure consumption perspective.
Yeah, go ahead.
And through you to Director Smith, if I may, just later on the report here on parking tickets. I'm not sure if you guys were presenting on that, but that almost doubled there. Just curious, was that more infractions, people being disobedient, or are we just having more enforcement?
Through you, Mayor Shantz, so two things. More complaints. We have more people complaining about parking. We're at our schools more often. We've had a lot of complaints about parking in and around schools, so we're there more. And then we've really tried to help the snowplow operators in the winter with the overnight winter parking. So we had more shifts, more officers on shift, and issued more tickets because of that.
Councillor Bryant, did you have your hand up, or same question? Okay. Anyone else? Councillor Schwint.
Part of the budget deliberations, we had some budgets for new positions. Just wondering where we're at in terms of hiring those positions.
Mr. Brenneman.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, with respect to the revenue clerk, that person will be onboarded shortly. With respect to the climate change and sustainability, we're in the final stages of final assessments, reference checks on that. And while not a new position, I'll just use this opportunity to say we're also in the second round final stages with respect to making an offer with respect to the Director of Financial Services position as well. I think those, just trying to think of any of the other ones. Sorry?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I believe development engineering was one of the other ones.
Yeah, Jared would have to update on where things are at with that.
Or Deanne.
Oh, sorry, Deanne.
Go ahead.
My apologies. Should have said
Ms.
Deanne.
Freeze.
Yeah, so that one is a little bit delayed because we're still waiting for the job equity evaluation form to get back, but it should be posted within the next few weeks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. I'm looking under fire services, and I'm looking at 2024, the dollar loss of 519,000 compared to 2023 and 2022. I'm curious as to why it's so much higher. whoever.
Yeah.
Through Madam Mayor, and of course, if Chief Aldis is watching and or sees us, and if I was wrong on that, he will hopefully correct me and give that out to council. But if I recall correctly, I believe we had a pretty large barn fire this year. I think it was this year that we had that, because I remember I heard the fire engines going by the office. So I believe that was probably why.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
It was just a couple weeks ago, I think. There was one anyway.
Good, thank you. And I also noticed the response time's better, which was a good thing.
Okay. Anyone else? No? That was just for information, so there's nothing to vote on really. So we'll go on to other business. We do need a motion passed that the Council of the Township of Woolwich participate in an in-person all-council meeting hosted by the Region of Waterloo in Regional Council Chambers on Friday, June 21st, 2024 at 2 p.m. Moved by Councillor Grant, seconded by Councillor Bryant. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. I didn't prepare a report on regional matters. I'll send, when we have our council next week, I'll send out the summary from that. We've done a lot on housing. Did you? Sure. This morning, sorry. Well, I'll try and start. We'll see how my memory is. This morning, the township mayors and the CAOs met with MP Lewis and May. So Tim Lewis and Brian May from Cambridge and North Dumfries, and then Tim Lewis represents the rest of us. We wanted to talk specifically about funding for most specifically bridges, and how we can work to find better funding for especially for bridges, because with our smaller population but our greater area and number of bridges, they're very expensive. So we talked about quite a number of different possibilities of funding for different things, but our ask was what our usual ask is. We would like to see something that is consistent so that we can do our future planning. And David, I don't know if you wanted to say a little more about that meeting?
Just to add that in the spirit of giving different options, to the mayor's point, we talked about the fact that there is always, and I'm going to use the old terminology because people are familiar with it, there is the traditional gas tax funding allocation. And again, we've been long champions of allocation-based funding so that each of the municipalities can use their asset management plans and priorities to be able to spearhead those particular funding requirements. However, I'd be remiss if I didn't also mention that you know, the future might be bold in terms of the leadership that is required to do something like AMO's report of a number of years ago, when they talked about the only true way to address the infrastructure deficit across the country is to allow for 1% of the sales tax. That would raise billions and billions of dollars towards addressing infrastructure needs, again, on a similar basis to the gas tax. The administration network is already in place. It's not like you'd have to reinvent the wheel. So as the mayor noted, we use this opportunity. We use this opportunity as well because in a meeting during the Roma timeframe with the province, you know, the comment was that you should talk to your federal counterparts because, you know, we believe things need to be worked out with them still. So, you know, there is the potential that we may have an opportunity in the future to bring the MPs and the MPPs in the room together, because we do need our federal and provincial counterparts working in sync with us on these infrastructure challenges.
And also last Thursday, we had State of the Township, which I think was very well received, and the Kiwanis Club has asked me to come and sort of do a mini presentation of that to them next week. So I'll do that for them. It's also online. If anybody wants to watch, you can go to the website and see it there. I'll also mention to you, State of the Region is Tuesday, the 28th at 8:30. I forget where. At the time, it's at the Ken Sealing Museum. So if anyone wants to attend that, Rayanne can set you up. Any council reports? Nope. Outstanding activity list? Councillor could have.
Thanks, Mayor. Through you to the rest of council. I've just been thinking about the WEAC request for the tree bylaw. And I'm wondering if we can put a little bit of thought into a response back to WEAC on that one. I don't know if we can direct staff to research this, but when I was considering, what we could do with it, I know that we do have the climate action levy that has a bit of money sitting there. And it's really hard for us to develop any sort of policy without a firm baseline of what we have, right? What is our tree canopy? And I don't know that I've gotten a firm answer, although there have been attempts to establish that. I think that it's really difficult for us to make any progress without measuring where we're at. So I was hoping maybe we could have a discussion about maybe a request back to WEAC and maybe rather than just kind of letting this hang out on outstanding activities list. What is it that we would want as a council when it comes to the tree canopy? Do we want to measure it? Do we want to have benchmarks, targets? What is the roadside tree planting doing to our tree canopy? It's increasing it substantially, but unless we start measuring it, we'll ever truly know what that means. And I think to what this request is actually getting at, if we're taking down, a 80-year-old mature tree, what is the canopy coverage reduction going to be as a result of that? And if we're just doing a one-to-one replacement, what is the impact of that? So this is just kind of a dump, and I apologize in advance for not having kind of more coalesced notes, but any thoughts, considerations on that?
Ms. Fries, did you want to make some comments? Thanks.
Yeah, so just a few things to note. So the reason why we had to kind of put it on the back burner and just keep it on the council up to-do list was because we didn't have the staff resources and we didn't have the room in our work plan to start undertaking that work on our own right now. It will take obviously a lot of research. That said, WEAC is a working committee and they have been compiling research to try to figure out the best steps for a future tree bylaw. So that work is slowly moving along as far as a working committee can do. And also Anne might be able to comment on this better, but there was an assessment of the tree canopy, and I think it was just Elmira, but Anne might be able to provide some more information on that as well. So there has been some work there. Yeah, a tree bylaw is not a small task, and it's a difficult task in a rural community where farming is affected as well. So it's a lot to consider. It's not that we can't do it. We need some staff resources. We need some funding. If we wanted to take funding from somewhere to get a consultant to do some research for us, and then kind of it has to be a little bit more decision about where this bylaw would actually come into place, and also the staffing implications to enforce the bylaw, as our bylaw division doesn't have the additional capacity either.
I think maybe something to put in that discussion, and I'll get to you in a second, to put into that discussion is, do we want to measure it just in our urban areas, or are we looking at the total township? Because that in particular would be really huge with the woodlots. Ms. MacArthur?
You, Madam Mayor, to council. So at one of the last WEAC meetings that I attended on behalf of Director Fries, I think the committee did
have some conversation about how they wanted to move forward. And I think Councillor Grant can maybe add to this conversation that they decided to, maybe their focus would be more on supporting Trees for Woolwich and those groups in getting trees in the ground and like a positive versus having a tree bylaw that was, had to be, have a permit and what is it that what authority do we have for bylaw? For trees and putting a bylaw for, individuals on their own private property versus our own property. So at the end of the day, at that conversation, I think they wanted to table the tree bylaw at this point and look for ways to support groups that are boots on the ground right now. So that would be kind of the one area. In terms of measurement, they have had staff, summer students over the past 4 or 5 years trying to measure and monitor within Elmira. We do have some data, and I can maybe bring back some more data from the impact study that group has generated. But it is really, really hard to keep tabs based on, we can know what we're planting, but then we don't know what's being taken down. So I think we can bring back some data maybe on township-owned properties in Elmira, but municipally owned properties in Elmira, but I don't think they will have it data for township-wide.
Councillor Grant, did you have something to add?
Yeah, so at our last WEAC meeting, we had, we delegated kind of who would look at which different sections of bylaws. We did look at a lot of neighboring townships bylaws, and a lot of them were predominantly urban centers. So I think Mayor Chance's suggestion of, if we were looking at a tree canopy, focusing on an urban center would probably make the most sense, or at least the most bang for our buck, essentially. But what Annie kind of said there is accurate, that we kind of moved past on tabling that, as it's just, we're not really sure how it would fit within the township at this point.
Yeah, and
Councillor
one of,
Gibbon.
sorry, one of the things that I think that during our last discussion on this really kind of hit home for me is that new developments are exempt from this. So those big mature trees that are being taken down aren't being replaced. So any bylaw isn't really going to target those big mature trees that are being taken down for the purpose of development. Now, if somebody takes down a tree in their backyard, I mean, it's their property. I can see why people would be against a tree bylaw to regulate that. But I think when we are looking at the way in which we develop out our subdivisions, for instance, enhancing those subdivisions with some of the existing trees, for instance, would just enhance the neighborhood in my mind. So how can we protect some of those mature trees that are going into some of these subdivisions? I think it is the question that keeps kicking around in my head, and I still don't think that the bylaw is going to impact that at all.
I think that there's very few trees in most of the subdivisions now are in what was fields. And I can tell you, when we built 40 years ago, there was a tree saving plan on our property. We were not allowed to cut down most of the trees on the property. I don't know if that was in perpetuity or what that, I have to go back and look, but we have in the past put restrictions on trees that can come down when housing is in a mature neighborhood. So, Councillor Schwint.
I was really happy to listen to Ms. MacArthur's response there. I think she nailed it bang on. It's what our principle should be in terms of promoting it. And I think as a township, we've done a good job with Trees for Woolwich and site plans, asking for trees, new developments, that type of thing. I don't think we have the staff time to write up a bylaw or to enforce it, proper one, when we're in a budget crunch to begin with. And to be honest, I don't see a problem. I think we've done a good job as residents promoting building trees. We talk about we lose mature trees and replace them with a seedling this high isn't the same thing. But we have to remember those trees in birdland that were planted 40 years ago that are this high are now mature trees. So every year trees die, trees get bigger. So it's a continuous cycle. We can't lose sight of that. So I'm really happy with the way the township's approaching it now. I'd hate to see us spend time and money on a tree bylaw.
Ms. Fries, can you remind us what we do in the new subdivisions? Do we require any kind of tree planting? Where do we stand on that?
Yeah, new developments and developments that would go through site plan. We do look at trees. We do look at tree protection plans wherever possible. They would not be subject to a tree bylaw, but that doesn't mean that we wouldn't review trees and also try to look at saving trees. It's just done in a different way.
Do we ask developers to plant trees?
Yes, absolutely.
Councillor Cadeau.
So I think we're all on the same page here, from the sounds of it. I don't think anybody's really gung-ho for a tree bylaw, but a tree protection plan, I think, is probably more what I had in mind, when we started discussing this. So I don't know if that's something that you can take back to Councillor Grant, if helpful, if not.
Do you want to remove this from the outstanding activity list, or do you want it to stay there?
I would defer to Councillor Grant on this one.
Thanks. I do think at this point, we could probably remove it from the outstanding list, and then we can talk with WEAC again and continue that discussion on a bylaw and whether or not we see value, or if there's other ideas for promotion of tree planting and tree preservation.
Okay, thank you. I saw Clerk Smith scribbling, so I think he's got that. Anything else? There is no notice of motion. We need a motion that the following bylaws in the hands of the clerk be read a first, second, third time and finally passed, and that they be numbered as bylaw number 30-2024 to 32-2024, and that they be signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed with a corporate seal. We have adoption of the tax rates. We have the appointment of a municipal law enforcement officer, and bylaw to confirm all actions and proceedings. Councillor Cadeau, Councillor Bryant, all those in favor, and that's carried. Thank you. And that brings us to the end of our agenda. Motion to adjourn to meet again in regular session on June 18th, 2024. Halfway through the year, can you believe it? Councillor Cadeau, Councillor Grant, all those in favor, and that's carried. Thank you. In closing, Council would like to thank all who participated, attended, or tuned into the meeting tonight. Council, please stay connected on Zoom until the live stream has stopped. And good night, everyone.